Welcome to the Shared Practices Podcast, Season 2, Episode 6. We are about to kick off a month of Dr. Hunter Smith episodes. This first episode was actually recorded a long time ago in Season 1, but we decided to wait to release it with these next two, which are all on how do I value a practice? How do I look at the numbers, interpret them, and then turn around and make an offer or move on? Because the practice isn't worth what they're asking for. The last episode in this series with Hunter is going to be specific numbers of specific practices. So we've had a number of people reach out to us. If you've got a practice right now that you're looking at within the next 2 weeks, then you can still email me, richard@sharedpractices.com, and we can take a look at those numbers on air. So we're going to break down some specific practices. And we've already actually had a really good experience where someone came to us with a practice and she said, I think this is it. This is the practice I want to buy. And my accountant is saying that I need to just lowball it by 10%, just because that's what you do. And we looked at the numbers and we kind of came up with something that maybe was a little bit better. And she submitted an offer. And sure enough, they accepted the offer. So now she's in the process of negotiating and closing on that practice. So super excited for her. So here's our interview with Dr. Hunter Smith. Okay, we have here with us today Dr. Hunter Smith. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you've heard Dr. Derek Williams and his journey straight out of dental school was heavily influenced by Dr. Smith. So Hunter has a unique way of evaluating practices, but he also has a pretty amazing story himself of getting out of dental school and getting going in a way that most people can't even fathom. So I want to introduce to you Dr. Hunter Smith.
I guess.
So tell us your story. Where did you go to dental school? And what were your goals coming out of dental school? And how did things play out for you?
Yeah, I went to the University of Tennessee in Memphis. First of all, let me apologize in advance for my accent. I am from Northeast Arkansas.
Perfect.
So maybe I have to put some kind of filter on to get my voice right.
I'll filter it out afterwards, and we'll be able to understand you once we're all done with
Perfect.
The EQ.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, I went to UT in Memphis. I was just about an hour from my house.
Nice.
So where I grew up, so very local. Honestly, in dental school, I wasn't a stud or any kind of big time.
You weren't a gunner, maybe, like trying to get straight A's on every single class and test and practical.
No, not even in. I mean, and some people that take off into ownership talk about how they were maybe not necessarily gunners at the education level, but then when they got to clinic, they really took off.
Sure.
And I really wasn't either of those things, to be completely honest. I mean, I would say I was a solid top 20 student, top 10 to 15 clinician. Certainly not, anybody that someone would come to ask questions of or anything. But
okay.
But where I really took off is we had a whopping 1 semester of practice management.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I just got really involved. My group leader in dental school was the practice management teacher, so I spent a lot of time with him.
Okay.
Trying to learn as much as I could about practice management and how it was running a business and what the second part of what being a dentist is.
Sure.
That doesn't get talked about in the 4 years you're there. So I had 3 options. I'll just go through them quickly.
Sure, no problem.
One, my now business partner and I. He had done a startup at the time. He was doing well. He had a big office. He had space for me.
Did he do that straight out of school, or was he just ahead of you, or both?
He was a year ahead of me.
Okay.
In dental school and in college. I mean, he was my mentor since college. So
okay, nice.
We had talked a little bit about me coming in there with the startup with him, just to help split cost and overhead. We obviously had no idea what we were doing, so. Looking back, it was a bad idea, but it was a thought, at least in my head. He had a beautiful office. He's my partner now, so I knew he knew what he was doing.
Right.
So. But I really narrowed that one out, and I had 2 other options. One was with an associateship position in a kind of local, regional group practice, DSO, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Or thirdly, I guess in this case, I could have bought a practice. I had no idea what buying a practice meant, what it was to be an owner. I honestly thought that the group practice thing was better for me in terms financially,
Sure.
how much work I would have, what I would learn.
Paying down some loans and getting some clinical experience.
Yeah, exactly what the problem is that everybody thinks now. I had all of those things.
Sure.
So it actually came down to a conversation with me and my wife. I asked her, and I said, I'm at a loss. I don't know what to do. And she said, well, I mean, we dated since we were 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
And she told me, she said, Hunter, you cannot work for anybody else right now. So what are you talking about? She said, you won't be the guy that is the first year and, your opinions and ideas don't matter. You won't take it well. And I said, well, that's probably true.
So basically she told you would be the worst associate that anyone could ever hire.
Yes, absolutely. Told me that basically word for word. And I knew it. I would have been a bad associate. I mean, it wasn't where my interest lied. It wasn't where my passion was. I was ready to manage people, I thought.
Sure.
So,
and whether or not that assessment was accurate or not, you thought you were ready to manage people. So that's all it takes.
I wasn't, to answer the question, but I mean, in terms of my mentality, that's where it was at. So I bought the practice. How I met the practice is an interesting story too. The practice came along because my wife babysat while I was going to dental school for some extra cash. She actually babysat some friends of my senior associate first practice.
Okay.
The grandkids. And one time the grandkids got together and his wife went. And they talked. He's like, what does your husband do? Oh, he's in dental school. What does your husband do? Oh, he's a retiring dentist. They should meet.
Perfect.
Yes, they should meet. So we had a couple of real informal conversations. He admitted that he wasn't a good business guy, but he could teach me dentistry. Wanted to stay on a year and then consider teaching at the dental school, and that he could help me, get a great start in my practice.
Sure.
And even he said, you probably won't make as much money as you would going to the group practice to associate. So,
right.
But long story short, I ended up, because of my mentality and personality, I ended up going with, I play a lot better with others now than I did. But
sure.
At the time, I needed to be on my own and make my own decisions and be my own guy. So that's what I did. I bought the first practice.
Well, and you got to have that self-awareness about yourself to realize I'm not going to do well in this type of environment where someone's bossing me around and telling me what materials to use and how to do the schedule. And maybe they don't have things well implemented and don't want to listen to you with your suggestions and ideas of how to do it better. You'd go crazy. And you know that about yourself. And that's what you have to have, is that self-awareness.
Yeah. And it was insecurity more than anything. Nowadays, I obviously have a partner. I work well with others. I actively seek out masterminds and people to talk to about this stuff.
Sure.
And join forces with. But at the time, I was insecure. I was a first year graduate. I thought that I would get in those meetings and get in those where I had really good ideas, and it would be discounted not because of the idea, but because of where I was at positionally on the totem pole, I guess you could say.
Right.
So it was my own personal insecurities and mentality that have changed over time. But at the time, it was the best decision for sure.
Okay, so you had this potential opportunity. How did that transition go about? Was this straight out of school as soon as you got your license? How long did this deal take, and how did you get financing? There's a lot of things like that people think, I can't do this straight out of school. And in general, I would say even people like you don't necessarily recommend that everyone should buy a practice straight out of school.
No, and it sounds arrogant or something along those lines, but there's 5 or 10%. I mean, maybe 1 to 3 per class that should do this kind of thing.
And that's about what my class was. If I look back over the last year, there's maybe 5 that are now in some sort of ownership position that have taken that leap right off the bat.
Yeah, and even in mine, now I graduated in May of 2014. There's probably 10 of the 80 that are in some kind of management, or in some kind of ownership role. So it's not It's not for everybody. There's situation. It's situation dependent. It's personality dependent. There's a bunch of different things to go. Motivation dependent. Uh, Family situation.
All the
things
above.
like yeah. So basically, what happened with me was. I had no idea. I'd read Dental Town a little bit, got some information.
That makes you an expert. That's all you need. You just read Dental Town, good to go.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like I was a good Dental Town townie. It was like I was like a casual weekend on board Dental Town townie at the time.
Kind of a lazy lurker on Dental Town.
Oh, absolutely. Zero post for sure. But I knew just enough to be dangerous, and I had a pretty good evaluation. Since I've been doing this, I've looked at lots and lots of evaluations, being a multi-practice owner. And the transition company that I worked with, or that Dr. Brown had hired, Mercer Transitions.
Okay. So it sounds like they're a group that knew what they were doing. It wasn't like he had just hired some local CPA to transition his practice for him.
Exactly. Or even worse, what I've seen is like the owner doctor trying to do the evaluation themselves.
For sale by owner, just kind of put a sale out front, come buy my dental practice.
Yeah, and it's worth X amount. But anyway, what these guys did well was they were an actual full-blown transition company.
Okay.
They didn't want to evaluate a practice and broker a deal and be done. But I came in at a late stage where he had a failed associateship get to the ownership stage. So Mercer had done this transition up until ready for it to be sold. So I step in and
it was just sitting there with a little bow on top of it ready for you.
Needed an update of the numbers, but in terms of the relationship that Dr. Brown had with the company, all this stuff was taken care of. And I guess this was about December of my senior year.
Okay.
And then by February, I had an evaluation in hand. And I read that thing cover to cover 100 times trying to figure out how they evaluated it. And what I really liked about what they did looking back is a lot of these evaluations that we can get into more later do these super complicated and over-the-top pro formas on multipliers of X and all this stuff.
Right.
And they got fair market value, and they're adding back in equipment. And I mean, it's crazy. And then they weight them all the same, regardless of what's number one and what's key in an evaluation is cash flow. And anybody who's ever bought a practice knows that. So what I liked about Mercer is they weighted a modified cash flow projection as 95 out of 100%. They gave like 2.5% to the other two techniques. The cash flow was 95% of what the value
interesting. Okay, so to explain that to someone who maybe just didn't catch all those details, basically they said the value of this practice is 95% the cash flow that it's going to kick off, the profit that you're going to take home, rather than all of these other factors and equipment and what you could buy or sell this for theoretically because of the market. So it's essentially a business as an entity is its ability to kick off income to you as the owner. And so that's how they did the valuation.
Exactly. And it's a pet peeve of mine, and I don't care to call him out. Henry Schein makes the worst transition, documents I've ever seen. And I've bought 2 practices from them, so it's not like I won't work with them. But Paragon did a pretty good job. Mercer did a pretty good job. There's some others that I've seen that just they're awful because they use these valuation techniques that are sophisticated in a unuseful way.
Overly complicated.
Yeah, and it's things that don't matter. So it's almost like, and I know this is not why they're doing it, but it's almost like they're trying to get people to skip over that and not look at it and like, okay, they just know what they're doing because they got a lot of words here.
Right, to not question you on this, to just say, okay, well, they must be right because look at all this complicated mumbo jumbo backing them up.
And then they eventually actually do a cash flow analysis of some kind, but they weight it equally to the other 3 and say, okay, this one says it's worth X amount, X amount, X amount, plus, divided by 3, there's the value.
Okay.
Where Mercer weighted 95% of it towards that cash flow, which is king and what matters.
Cool. Okay. Did you have anyone else look at that and do their version of the analysis?
I'm telling you, I'm the worst, man. I did not know what I was doing. And this is, talk about something you don't want to do. I got so lucky, but I had a local attorney look at it. And the guy did not even understand he wanted like the previous owner's LLC documents. And
boy.
he thought I was buying to act like the business, and dental practices are asset purchases.
Okay.
So it didn't matter if their corporate documentation or anything. He just needed to know what the assets were. So I took him the PPA or APA, which for people who don't know, practice purchase agreement or asset purchase agreement that you sign on transitions. I took him that and was like, hey, can you review this and just make sure it's like Arkansas legal and
just make sure this is a real document.
Yeah, make sure it's real and binding and that it like kind of makes sense. And
sure.
He came back with all kinds of red pen marks that
oh
said,
boy,
LLC documentation needed, blah 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 blah. So I basically fired him and said, no,
good.
whatever.
Well, at least you didn't take it back to the table and say, well, my lawyer said I need this, this, and this, and sink the deal because you had someone who didn't know what they were talking about.
It's a great point too, because it's a little early. I mean, we're going off tangent here, but
sure.
If you got a appropriately evaluated practice, it makes zero sense for you to nickel and dime over 10 to 20 grand, depending on the practice size. And if it's an appropriately sized practice,
right,
that's not a significant amount. It seems like it, but it's not. We're talking $100 a month on a loan payment. And if you spend 1 month arguing back and forth over these details and lose a month of ownership worth 50, 60 grand of collections,
it makes no sense.
You lost big time. I mean, it's so get these. It sounds like I'm going to be bashing attorneys and all these guys that do review, and I actually think you absolutely have to have them. But if you hire the wrong person and they're nitpicky and they're looking for, stupid verbiage changes and stupid, letters and not capitalized appropriately, and
sure.
You're arguing back and forth over this nonsense, you're costing yourself time and money. And you need to look for someone more that's not about you on an hourly, wage or something.
Okay, so if you hire someone that's paid by the hour that maybe doesn't know dentistry, they're going to go ahead and find a lot of stuff that they can fix and improve, quote unquote, and bill you for that hourly time. Whereas if you find a dental CPA or a dental attorney who's done multiple deals like this and understand how it all works, they're not going to get bogged down in the nitty gritty per se, and might save you a whole lot of money and kind of check everything versus get you hung up and kind of waterlog the whole deal.
It's stereotyping, but it's certainly a conflict of interest to have someone like that. You know what I mean? I mean, even if they don't mean to,
right?
That's certainly a thought in my mind and probably in their mind too. So,
well, and if we were paid as dentists by the hour, the urgency and the efficiency might not be there, and there might be the opposite incentive where it's like, oh, well, I can justify taking 2 hours for this MOD because I want it to be the best, and I'm getting billed per hour, so that's what matters. Absolutely,
and it just makes you think. So, and there's some dental attorneys and CPAs that'll do that same shit. I mean, same stuff that'll sit there and, because they've seen the worst of the worst, right? So they're kind of scared in certain ways that, oh God, there's this one time in my 20-year career
right.
where this particular thing happened because the previous owner was a sociopath.
Right.
And now I have to
went
change
through and read all these clauses and tried to trigger this or that, the other.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to know who you're getting in bed with for sure.
Okay.
Both in terms of the seller doctor, buyer doctor, your team around you that you're working with.
So bringing it back to your experience, ideally, if knowing what you know now back then, you would have had someone else value the practice from a buyer's perspective who knew what they were talking about, and then maybe had a counteroffer. But you didn't do that, and you were fortunate enough that you didn't get screwed.
I hate counteroffers, so I'm going to stop that.
Okay.
I want to say more of I would have had them evaluate to see if it was a good deal.
Sure.
Because that kind of goes back to my point. If you're arguing, you're hurting the transition process.
Okay.
And if it's far enough apart that you're having a counteroffer, you either have an unreasonable seller or they're working with an unreasonable broker. There's something going on. The situation's just not right for you. So it's got to be an egregiously bad valuation for you to be trying to counter offer. and you got to really, really want that practice
Okay.
for that to happen. So maybe not counteroffer, but have someone review it to see if that fit my situation.
Okay. Make sure we're in the ballpark. Make sure this can work.
And the funny story, I actually called one of the Dental Town legends and asked them. I called and left a message and told them, on the message a little bit about the situation I was in. Seller doctor wanted to stay, what the collections and the production of the practice were. And it was $1 million practice. And got a call back, didn't answer because I didn't know who it was or I was in class or something. Voicemail is like just yelling, like screaming in the phone almost. This is not a 2-doctor practice. You can't produce enough in that practice to feed 2 mouths, blah, blah, blah. Like just based on what he heard in a message, having never talked to me or what my goals were, what the seller's goals were. So I kind of got turned off on that a little bit. But, so I forgot my point here.
But this is great.
It was a funny story. That goes on to I made probably 3 times as much as what I would have as an associate the first year, and the seller doctor made over $200,000. So it sounds like a 2-doctor practice to me. So
I don't know. I'll have to ask you afterwards. I might have already had this person on my podcast, but even the person who I think it might be, said, "Don't trust anyone's opinion, including my own." And that's why I'm trying to get multiple perspectives on this, because there is no one right way to move into practice ownership. And your situation is a very unique one. So let's dive into how you transitioned that first year out compared to maybe a traditional, here are the keys to the practice, see ya, I'm out of here.
Sure. So after I got the valuation back, got it kind of semi-looked at, and then I took it to a local bank that my now business partner had a great relationship with, known him our whole lives. I went in there super prepared, at least sounded like I knew what I was talking about.
Right.
I'd read the valuation so many times. The seller doctor actually banked with this bank anyway, so they knew the tax returns. They knew the situation of the practice and how 40 years it had been a profitable practice. So
this is a local bank run by real people who are actually thinking about this versus some national bank that has certain criteria and triggers that if you don't meet those criteria and triggers, they're going to write you off immediately.
Exactly. And that's a big point I've tried to make on Dental Town a couple times. This is a local bank that I went to, presented a semi-business plan to, had the cash flow analysis for. They had the tax returns. They had a relationship with the seller. They had a relationship with me and my partner now. And we pulled the trigger. I mean, they were on board, and I associated for 3 months. Went into the practice in May. Actually in June. I got my license June 12th. I still remember it was a Thursday. And
it's a good feeling.
Yeah, I think I called at lunch or something during that day just to check on the status, and they said, "You're approved. Your license number is blah, blah, blah." So I was like, okay.
Perfect. Let's go.
Can I cut a tooth this afternoon?
Right.
So I worked that afternoon, and our goal was to get it ready on September 1st.
Awesome.
For the transition. We were mid-July. Everything was done. Seller calls me in the office and says, we're going to be done early. You want to do it August 1st? And I said, yes, sir.
Interesting. So, and I want to differentiate this. Sometimes people go into these, I'm going to buy you out type deals without a lot on paper up front. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to be an associate here and then I'm going to buy them out. And, maybe it'll be a year or 2, but we'll kind of test it out. But there's nothing on paper. It's just a regular associate type contract. Whereas this was structured up front as a buyout with valuations. And it's just a timeline question of when you're actually transitioning. Is that correct?
Yeah, because of when I got started, how quickly I got approved on lending, the fact that they already had the evaluation basically completed when I came on board. A lot of things fell correctly, but yeah, we knew we had the contracts in hand to sign. It was just a matter of getting to that point, get a closing with the bank, blah blah blah.
Did the bank do so Derek Williams, he had to do a small business, an SBA loan. Did you have a more traditional business type loan, or were you also using an SBA loan?
No, it's in-house.
In-house
In-house
loan. Because of
that
local bank.
Yep. 10-year AM.
Okay.
4-ish%.
Okay.
Yeah, 4%. So yeah, it was a standard for what
That's an awesome
industry is.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you got a real loan, you got the practice is working out, and you've got this doc who's there with you as the owner doc at first, and then you switch roles and you become the owner and he becomes the associate. So it was 3 months of you being the associate. Is that correct? Let me think.
Well, yeah, half of June, July, and half of June and July.
Okay.
So month and a half.
Oh, okay. So not even. So it was a real quick, you being the associate, him being the owner. And during that time, was he kind of treating you like the owner, even though you technically weren't yet? Or was he still introducing you as the associate? How did that transition work? You being a new doc and not having a lot of experience.
Looking back, I can't recall, how it was
in
our
that
interactions.
little window right there. Okay, that's fine.
I know that it wasn't that he introduced me as an associate.
Okay.
I don't remember how much control I had from the very beginning. I know he still bought me supplies in the first couple months. He treated me right. He didn't try to shortchange me knowing when the sale was.
Sure.
I got so lucky. I hope he listens to this one day, because I don't think he realizes how much, dentistry is hard.
Yeah.
And anyone who tells something different is wrong. That's why I get so irritated when some of these people that are not dentists, that are just consultants, are talking about practice is not big enough for you. Or you can't produce, or just go in there and produce $500,000. Get your hands seized up. What's wrong with you?
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. It's like, have you ever sat beside a chair and produced $500,000 with your own hands
Sure.
and dealing with patients? And so I get so irritated when I hear that stuff. But it's really, really hard, and it's really, really hard out of school. And
I think it's so individual too. It's like we all have our own strengths and weaknesses, and some of us maybe hand skill wise we're slower, but we're better with people, or maybe vice versa. And we've all got different things to work on, and we have limitations of our circumstance of what's available to us and how many patients we're given. And there's a lot that's out of your control initially, but also there's a lot that you can do to improve in a lot of things. But it's never as simple as consultants and maybe some people want to make it out to be.
Oh, never as simple. And I wasn't good at any of that stuff. I had ambition and arrogance is all I had.
Sometimes that's all you need. No, I'm just kidding.
That's all I had, man. And he treated me so good. And I mean, I would try to take a tooth out or something. I thought I was God's gift to oral surgery out of school. I'd taken out those perial teeth on underprivileged people, and I thought I could take out any tooth. The first time you get like a real life tooth in the head, try to take that sucker out, and you're like, oh my God, it's in there permanently.
What's wrong with this thing? It's ankylosed. All of them, all these teeth are ankylosed.
I think my first 25 teeth in private practice were absolutely ankylosed.
Definitely ankylosed.
But he would come in and never made me feel like an idiot, and I would go get him, and I look back and I thank myself for this, not being so arrogant, even though I am an arrogant guy, to not ask for help. And I would go get him and I'd say, Doc, the patients get tired. I'm tired. Can you help me with this? And I could have just barely luxated it any. And he would go, oh, Dr. Smith, you've already done all the hard work. Let me just show you a little old guy technique or something.
Sure.
And take the tooth out from scratch.
Right.
And give the patient reassurance, teach me how to do it. I'm jaded or not jaded is the wrong word. I'm a victim of my own experience and what I suggest to people now, because my senior associate transition was so good the first time.
So you lucked out in so many ways, not only in finding this opportunity and getting the financing, but then he's just such a stand-up guy that's willing to take you under his wing at the same time as building you up in front of the patients and the staff. And it's like the perfect transition. You couldn't have had a better transition is what you're trying to say.
None. No, there's no way. And that's what, it sounds corny or deep or whatever, but that's what life is. You find out, you take your advantages, and what you can make out of them is everything.
Sure.
So I give myself credit for running with it, but I absolutely was lucky in every single first part. This doesn't happen.
And that's why we were saying earlier that you don't recommend this necessarily to everyone, because the next guy might try and do the same thing and doesn't have the opportunity, doesn't get the financing, and then gets screwed over by a so-so doc who hangs around and messes up the practice for the last 6 months while he's still there.
Yeah, I mean, take the next guy in line. I mean, I know you've talked to Derek, and he's as prepared as any human could have been in dental school, I think,
Right.
for business ownership.
Absolutely.
He did everything he possibly could. He talked to me, and I gave him all the advice I could. He talked to Scott Luna, and Scott gave him all the advice he could. And I don't know what y'all have talked about, and I don't think he would mind me telling this if y'all didn't, but he was stressed out.
Oh, yeah.
First 2 weeks, of ownership.
No, he absolutely told us. That's when we talked to him, is right at the end of the 2 weeks. So it was perfect.
Oh, you caught him on the upswing then, huh?
Yeah.
So, but that guy is as prepared as he could possibly be, and the circumstances. I mean, I was a phone call away at any time from him. He had everybody around him who knew what he wanted to do and how to do it, and still, it's difficult. So
okay, so and you're absolutely right, and that's why both you and Derek are great examples, and also not like it would be unfair of yourself to hold up yourself and say, hey, I'm not where these guys are 6 months into having graduated from school. I don't own my own practice. I'm not doing all these things and beating yourself up. Don't do that. Just learn what you can and move forward with it. So
exactly. Let me make a point real quick.
Absolutely.
I'm not an example. Derek Williams is not an example. Scott Luna is not an example of something to do. What we should be to people who have questions is a source. We should be somebody's lucky break, talking to us and getting our input and what advantages we had and how to take off with them. You don't set yourself as an example and say that I got to achieve that in a certain amount of time, because you may get it quicker, may take you slower. But if you learn everything you can and try to take advantage of your opportunities, then that's what this is, being successful and getting to a level of success is about. So
absolutely. When I brought Spear Education on as a sponsor, I assumed, okay, this is going to be occlusion, full mouth rehab type CE. And you've already seen that that's not the case. Just today, I discovered they have a whole section on transitions, including a 3.5-hour course on valuation. So here's a few clips from Imtiaz Manji's course on practice valuation.
Through this process. So there are valuation pitfalls that we have to pay attention to. In other words, we hear somebody tell us, I got an unbelievable deal. I got this practice for $300,000 and you're paying $600,000. Why would you pay $600,000 for a practice? I've got a wonderful practice for $300,000. Or it is based on, we don't need anybody. Let's not spend the money on valuations. Let's you and I agree to terms, because I was taught this formula in school, or I've listened to this Manji guy on learning about valuations and appraisals, and he came up with a number. So I think we can kind of do it on our own. And you never want to do that, because that's not what you do. It would be like me doing dentistry. I'm not going to do dentistry. I'm going to hurt somebody very badly, and I'll be committing malpractice. I'm not a dentist. So what are the three factors that go into valuations? The first one is the assets of the practice, the physical assets. The second one is the profitability, management, and risk. And the third one is market conditions. We're going to take a look at all three. And so I'm going to start with the assets, which are fairly easy to
This course is awesome. With Imtiaz's experience from Mercer Transitions, which he was one of the founders and CEOs of that company, he lays out how and why this valuation needs to get done and how to use the information to get to a fair value for both the buyer and the seller. To take this course and hundreds of others, go to speareducation.com and request a guest pass. So speaking of examples and sources of information and not holding ourselves up to a certain standard, I want you to share with our audience kind of the next few steps and where you've gotten since then. And nobody beat yourself up if you don't get this far in 2 years. But I love your journey. I love the things that come next. So what happened after that first practice, that first transition that went so well? Where did you go from there?
So I got to about November of 2014, which was 3 months after 3 months after I bought the first practice.
Okay.
And it sounds bad. I was just kind of bored.
You already bored?
So I had a guy that sent an email out who was trying to transition his practice or sell his practice. So I jumped right in. I used what I learned from the first transition. I used the documentation, the valuation techniques, and tried to reproduce them and evaluate his practice.
So where did you get this email, and how far away was this guy? How did this just kind of stumble
same
across?
Town, Same town. Looking back, there's no chance in hell I would have bought it, knowing what I know now.
Okay.
But I didn't know what I know now. So the email came from my school has when you graduate, your email goes on this list. And
alumni network thing or something?
Yeah. And the chancellor of student affairs at the school sends out opportunities for
cool.
practices. So
That's
it was
great.
in my hometown. It was in the town I was practicing in. It was a smaller practice that I felt like I could merge or potentially work a couple of days a week because I had senior associate. So got through the evaluation, talked to him a lot, got pretty deep, but he wanted to sell the commercial real estate, and I just wasn't prepared for that.
Okay.
So I passed on it. But I'm learning more now, right? So,
right. Almost bit, decided not. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay.
So then I am just learning dentistry for the next 6 or 8 months, kind of biding my time, making good money. I was feeling pretty good, making changes within my first practice that were being successful. And I joined back up with my now business partner, and we were talking. He had merged his startup into a senior associate transition like I had.
Okay.
So we had the same situation, but
so
he brought his patients.
He did the startup on his own, and then he brought in someone who was kind of
Okay. He took his startup and let his lease go, and moved his patient base in with an existing practice.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and
so he did kind of a merger senior associate type thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we both had senior associates. I think neither one of us were happy necessarily with the day-to-day grind of what dentistry is and can be. And we were looking for other avenues.
Sure.
We talked about being a traveling IV, third molar sedation implant, or molar endo group.
Okay.
We talked about real estate investing, which we ended up buying 10 rent houses.
Okay. How'd that go?
We still have them. So
nice. Well,
their management company does them, so I assume they're still there and rented. But
there you go.
But we did just different things on how we were going to take the next step. And what we decided was we needed to get busier clinically. So,
okay.
Ironically, our first multi-practice journey was to get busier.
Which usually when people are looking at multi-practice, they're looking at, I want to step back from the dentistry and do more ownership type things. And you guys are going the other way. You're like, I need more clinical dentistry in my life. Let's buy another practice.
Exactly. More money necessarily, I guess, more exposure.
Sure.
But by the way, let's be honest about something. Dentistry is a job, right? Last time I checked.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Why is everybody so scared to talk about that they want to make as much money as possible?
No, I'm okay with that.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm so it's like a negative or something when you say, "Oh, we made a lot of money this year. We did really good this year. Our production was up." Well, you must be over-treating, or you're greedy, or
there's a combination of jealousy and wanting to feel superior, and I feel like our whole country is kind of anti-wealth and anti, all that at this point in time. So. But yeah, no, we're on the same page.
Yeah, it's a job. You're trying to make as much money as humanly possible, and if once you achieve financial freedom, if it's still your passion and your calling or whatever, then keep doing it and give back and all that stuff. But we wanted more money. I don't care to say.
Sure.
I mean, we were doing good, and we thought we had a little niche here, and we wanted more money. So we went and found a practice that was way too big. But it was a perfect situation looking back. Again, it's just me and us being super lucky.
Way too big, like how many chairs, a ton of charts or something like that?
Just size-wise, it's too big because the loan was big.
Okay.
And obviously we'd only been doing it a year and a half for me, and barely over a year for me and barely over a year and a half for him, or 2 years, something like that. I can't remember.
Okay.
This is September of 15, and I graduated in May of 14. So, yeah, a little over a year for me, a little over 2 for him. Founded on Dental Town Classifieds, and this was the start of our valuation techniques. We used my practice as the baseline.
Okay.
And So the way we got funded for this practice was the sales practice on this practice was $748,000, of which over $500,000 was complete goodwill, blue sky, unprotected nonsense. I mean, bank had no reason to loan us this amount of money. But
and you say that, so just so I can understand, and maybe our audience can understand better, you mean that, like, you know, the hard assets are maybe 200,000, and then the remaining 500,000 is not the actual equipment and practice and the physical stuff. The remaining part is this quote unquote goodwill that's being transferred with the patient charts and the reputation. Is that what you mean when you say, you know, blue sky, the 500,000?
Yeah. So when you buy a dental practice, the majority of what you're buying is what's called goodwill, or just the services that the practice offers, and the patient base, and you know, there's not anything tangible necessarily.
Okay.
So
it's like
when
the opportunity to create revenue.
Yeah, to piggyback on the revenue that's there, what the other guys created. So what they do in an evaluation, and part of the negotiation process, is separating the sales price into these categories. And, you know, to be completely honest, the equipment's never hardly ever worth what they say it is.
Sure.
I mean, if a bank repos it, they're going to get half of what it's worth at the most.
Okay.
So, but just on paper alone, I mean, they have to show to their board or whatever this local bank was, what was actually in the bill of sale is goodwill, not protectable, non-collateralized loan, blue sky is called, was over $500,000.
Okay. So basically this matters, you know, I'm just trying to figure out who this matters to. It matters to the bank because they have nothing to take back if you defaulted. So that
they cannot protect it at all.
It's more of a risk for them. So that's why
it's almost a complete character loan in a way. I mean, it's cash flow based, but I mean, it's character.
If you ended up sucking as a dentist and just screwed it all up, you know, that could all disappear rather quickly, and they would have nothing to take back.
If we defaulted on this loan, say in the first 2 months or something, the bank would have maybe been able to seize, you know, $100,000 worth of equipment or something on a $748,000 loan.
Okay.
So they're taking over $500,000 gamble on us being able to reproduce this practice a year and a half out of school with one practice as a kind of blueprint.
As our proof that, hey, we can do this. Let's do it again.
But this is where we found out about ourselves and what we did. I mean, we sat down on Excel spreadsheets and made cash flow projections and month by month cash flow projections and comparisons between my practice and this practice and what we could get it to eventually, and evaluating it to see how much of it, you know, was reproducible cash flow that we could go in and do. Where can we add to the practice? So I took all this in a folder to the bank and basically said, and I can still remember sending the email to my business partner. Now I stayed up to like 4 o'clock in the morning running these projection numbers.
Right.
And I typed in the email, Will, I just found $250,000 of untapped money in this practice. So the practice had about 700,000 or 70,000 in EBITDA.
Okay.
So it was valued like 10x or something. It was awful. We shouldn't have bought that one either. But
and we'll go into that in future seasons. If people hear EBITDA and kind of their eyes roll because they don't understand the accounting jargon, we'll go into that. So don't worry.
Yeah. So sorry, I get
That's okay. That's totally fine.
But it was way overpriced, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
Henry Science Transition special for sure. So I was so excited. I found it, and I was like, "Here it is! It's right in front of me. We got to get this practice." So we fought, kicked, and clawed, and finally got this practice bought. Actually, what ended up happening was one local bank sold half the loan to another local bank.
Okay.
So the loans actually split among 2 different banks locally that have the loan. We only pay one of them, but they have to give money for the other half to the other bank. So, but we got in it. Our cash flow projection was $260 in profit for the owners.
Okay.
And in the first year we went over $440. So,
oh wow.
So we found the $250, and that wasn't all. So
right.
But no, that was the start of. After we pulled that one off, you talk about arrogance kicking in. We thought we knew what we were doing.
You'd unlocked the secrets to everything.
Yeah. So in the next 10 months after that, starting January 1st of this year, we have bought 4 more. So,
so you're just barely 2 years out of school. Your partner's 3 years out of school. And now between the two of you, you own 5 practices?
6.
6. Oh my goodness.
And we are currently evaluating the 7th, and we'll have it by the end of the year.
No way. That's out of control. So it's you figured some things out, and it sounds like from what you've kind of said, there obviously were more things to figure out after that point.
Yeah, and this is a point that I'm going to make that I'll probably get eyes rolled at or something, but half of this little game that we all play trying to get toward ownership is just having guts. I mean, as bad as that sounds to say, there's people that are way smarter than me that know way more about accounting and finance and the maybe not practice evaluations at this point, but they can evaluate a practice and an opportunity to know what it is, that just can't pull the trigger. Sure. that are scared of their student loan debt, or of all these misconceptions out there about you can't be an owner because you've got too much student loans, or you can't be an owner because it's risky, you can't be an owner because of this reason or that reason. They're just scared to pull the trigger. And one thing we've never lacked is pulling the trigger. So
right. And it is scary. I mean, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. Everyone's not doing it. And all of the pressure is mounting in the other direction of student loans and feeling like there's so much dentistry still to learn. I still need this, that, and the other. Make it easy to procrastinate that decision and procrastinate the risk and the jumping in. So your guys' secret was to do it once and realize, okay, that wasn't as bad as we thought it was. Let's try it again. And even that, from that first time to that second time, a lot of dentists will say, I can't own a second practice. I've already got one here. I don't want to take the risk and own the second one. Or you guys instead said, well, we did it once. Let's see if it'll work again. And it worked out. It worked out the second time. It doesn't always work out for the second or third practice. And I know a couple dentists who have multiple practices and they don't feel as great about their second or third practice as they do about their first practice. So,
well, we learned every time. And, as sentimental as this sounds, we had each other, right? We would get in the car and drive to the dog track, play a hand to a blackjack or something, and we'd talking business about, what's our next step? Can we pull it off? How are we going to pull it off? We basically had our own internal little mastermind group.
Right, the two of you.
So having a partner is 150% of the reason that each of us are where we're at.
Right.
And it's just another, it sounds like I give just awful advice because it's just another example of me getting lucky, but just two like-minded guys talking together with similar goals who knew each other for their whole, since college, who are really great friends working toward a common, idea that have allowed us to grow this fast, but the principles are the same for anybody. So we learned something every time.
And it's not like there aren't any resources available to everyone else in terms of Dental Town and Breakaway and other podcasts and Mark Costes and all these people who are doing multi-practice things and are turning around and teaching and consulting and coaching and doing masterminds on those levels as well. So the resources exist, but any of those resources require a plunge. You have to go pay for the course and actually do it and then turn around and implement it.
That's why the people like us do this. That's why I'll do any podcast, especially ones like this that are, that got good information from guys who've done it, that got, Dr. Luna, that got Derek, that got, I think I saw Mark on the list, Costas, guys that care about being the resource for the guys that want to take the next step, the guys and girls that want to take the next step. So,
well, and thank you for being willing to get on here and talk with us. And really it's amazing that there are that many people that are willing to turn around and just share their experiences and what they've learned. So coming back to this, what would you say to that new grad who thinks they want to own, they're unsure, and they're trying to create a course for themselves from graduation to ownership? what would your advice be to that person?
Great question. Okay, first of all, I think you mentioned that maybe Wood said this on the earlier podcast, that you trust nobody.
Sure.
If you're going to learn from people, it needs to be people that have done it.
Okay.
And that have done it in a way that you're going to have to face. The people that have done this multiple times, Breakaway Practice, myself, Graham Dursley and the Practice on Fire group,
yep.
We're the guys who get kind of scoffed at as being, greedy or DSOs or corporate dentistry or whatever. But we have the data that shows how to make this successful. And we're the guys on these podcasts talking about how to get there. So you need to really think about who you're listening to, who you're getting information from, whether they've done it recently, have they been successful in doing it? Yeah. I'm reading a book right now called Rework.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things it actually says in it, and it's really stuck with me, it's it's like misconception to learn from your failures.
Okay.
So everybody's like, well, you haven't failed yet. You haven't experienced failure. You haven't, I messed this up, and here's what you should do because I messed this up.
Right.
Well, who in the world said that that's a good idea? I mean, that teaches you what not to do, right?
Right.
But what you should build on is success, because that teaches you the right way to do it, and then keep moving forward based on that success. So look for the people who've experienced success in the path that you want to take. If your path is to be an owner, then learn from the guys who want you to be an owner, who are owners, who are going to teach you how to be an owner in today's market. So you want to read everything that, you want to learn from Practice on Fire.
Okay.
You want to learn from especially Breakaway Practice.
Mm-hmm.
You want to read Post on Dental Town from, Jason Wood. He gives information great information, when he's not bashing certain industries. Tim Lott is probably an angel sent here to teach all of us morons how to accounting.
I need to get him on.
Please, if you're doing this in seasons where you're going to talk about any kind of numbers or accounting, I will personally message him and tell him, please, Tim, do this for the good of all of us.
And he's an awesome guy, and I talked with him when I went to the Townie meeting a couple of years ago, and I'm sure he'd be willing to. He's so generous and super nice. I just haven't reached out to him yet. Yeah,
those Tim Lott, Jason Wood, myself, Derek now, who's experienced success in the first month and got, corporate dentistry is a path. As the private associateship is a path. I've heard it said though that, you should look for this opportunity right here. It's a practice that's got $800,000 to $1 million in revenue that the senior associate wants an associate, or the senior doc wants an associate that's going to help. They're going to mentor you. There's probably like 6 of those in the United States. I mean, seriously. What?
And it's actually funny. So the next topic in the podcast that I really wanted to address was how to find a great associateship straight out of school.
Good luck.
And the more I look into it, the more I realize that this ideal of this private practice experience with a single doc who's going to mentor you really doesn't exist in the quantity or availability that it needs to. It's a home run. And if you want to be a long-term associate, maybe after a few years of having a few crappy associateships and getting some skills and some speed and experience, then maybe you'll be able to find a small type deal where it's you and one other doc and you're working in their practice. But most of the time, a single doc doesn't have the production, doesn't have the systems, doesn't have the capabilities, and they have the personality that is drawing kind of patients to themselves, and the staff has a hard time deciding between assigning patients to you and to them. And so many new docs have bad experiences in these partnership type associateship. So,
and is that even is it even good, Richard, to assume that the best thing that you could do, as I've heard it said, is to find that senior associate mentor or senior doctor mentor who's going to let you associate in their practice for a year while you get your hands beat? Is that even best? Because there you're going back to the one experience thing. If I did that in my practice, I would be doing H&H impressions that, or, it's, I know we're talking on so a 2-step impression technique instead of letting them set up together.
Sure.
That's probably not the best way.
Because that's what he did.
Yeah, because that's what he did. I mean, that's what he taught me. You're like at a one-on-one GPR, basically, where you're going to learn to practice just like that guy.
Good and bad.
Yeah, the good and the bad. So is that even what's best? I mean, for a young doc, who knows? But you just got to learn as much as you can and from the right people and find out what your goals are and try to get on that path. So we're trying to create one of those paths for them.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, I think that kind of wraps up this discussion of your journey. Thank you so much for getting on with us and sharing both your perspective, your knowledge, and we're going to be hitting you up. And you've already agreed to this. This is great. We're going to hit you up when it comes to valuation, when it comes to the key systems that you tune up first and where you see potential value in practices, and then how to grow and scale these practices. We're going to try and hit you up for every season that it makes sense to, and get your opinion and your perspective, being a recent multi-practice transition person who's done this over and over and over and over. So thank you so much.
I mean, Richard, thank you so much for getting this set up. Guys and girls that are listening to this is such an amazing lineup of people that he has so far, excluding myself.
Including.
But that's gotten set up that are a resource of the exact people that I'm talking about. Please learn from this. Rich has got such a great game plan together on how we can help get people to one of the goals of dentistry, and it's a great format. They're great people that are giving advice. So thank you so much for getting these people together and creating this. And I think it's going to be super successful and helpful in the long run. So. Well,
it's been a ton of fun so far, and hopefully we can keep getting these people back on and keep putting out the good content. So thank you.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Okay. See ya. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much to everyone who has reached out or who's left us a review. We are almost at 50 reviews. I think we were at 47 the last time I checked. So please, if you haven't had a chance to, pull out your phone on the iTunes store if you're on a Apple device, or in the Google Play Store if you can find us on Google Music, not the Google Play app, but the Google Music app, and leave us a review there. Awesome. Thank you. This has been the Shared Practices Podcast, and we'll talk to you next time.